The following reading is from George Lawson's commentary on Proverbs 9. The happiness of the followers of Christ is not entirely reserved to another world. Even in this life they are admitted to a feast of fat things. Verse 1. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn out her 7 pillars. The Church of Christ is a house in which he dwells and takes pleasure. Psalm 132, verse 13. It must be a glorious edifice, for wisdom is the builder of it. Matthew 16, verse 18. It is a strong and durable building, for it has many pillars, hewed out, not by the wisest of kings, but by the wisdom of God. Here there is abundance of soul-nourishing provision. For, verse 2, she hath killed her beasts, she hath mingled her wine, she hath also furnished her table. We shall surely be satisfied with the fatness of God's house, with that flesh which is given for the life of the world, and with that spiced wine which is the blood of the New Testament. Does Christ give us his own flesh and blood to nourish and refresh our souls? What grace, what comfort, what privilege will he withhold? He is most willing to communicate this provision to us. Verse 3. She hath sent forth her maidens. He cries upon the highest places of the city. The servants of Christ are called maidens, because Christ himself is spoken of under the character of wisdom, which in the Hebrew language is of the feminine gender. The followers of the Lamb are called virgins to denote their purity. Revelation 14. Ministers also must be pure in their doctrine and behavior. The voice of these maidens is a voice of that wisdom which sends them. It is she that gives the invitation by their mouth, and she does it in the most public and audible manner, crying with a voice like that of a herald from the highest places of the city. But who are those that are invited to this feast? Verses 4 and 5. Whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. As for him that wanteth understanding, she saith to him, Come, eat of my bread, and drink of the wine which I have mingled. The simple and unwise are welcome to this feast. They are called not only by the servants, but by the master of the feast, to partake of these precious provisions. The poor, the maimed, the lame, and the blind, they that have no money, and they that have spent all their substance for things that do not profit, are graciously invited to come and eat and drink abundantly by receiving Christ and his salvation, as they are freely offered in the gospel. Luke 14, Isaiah 55, verses 1 to 4. But we cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and the table of devils. When we come to Jesus by faith and partake of his precious blessings, we must forsake the society and the course of the foolish. Verse 6. Forsake the foolish and live, and go in the way of understanding. The companion of fools shall remain forever in the congregation of the dead. But in the way of understanding there is life and no death. Do we abhor death and love life? Then if we believe the words of Christ, we shall forsake the foolish, and go in the path of understanding. Proverbs 13, verse 14. John 7, verse 51. But may we not associate with the foolish in order to reclaim them? There are 2 sorts of foolish persons. Some have naturally a pliable and modest disposition, though destitute of the grace of God. Or though conversant in the ways of sin, they are not yet hardened in sin by long practice. There may be some hope of making good impressions on the mind of such persons as these. But there are others who are stubborn and determined sinners. To them in ordinary cases there is no hope of doing any good. Verses 7 and 8. He that reproves a scorner gets to himself shame, and he that rebukes a wicked man gets himself a blot. Reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. If we reprove the profligate sinners that mock at everything sacred, we are not likely to benefit them, but to procure hurt to ourselves. Such men, when we have irritated them by our admonitions, will pry into our characters with all the keenness of malice and revenge. Few characters can stand the scrutiny of a malicious eye, so that instead of serving them, we shall be in danger of losing much of our usefulness to others by making them our enemies. Matthew 7, verse 6. Yet reproofs are like pearls when they are administered with the meekness of wisdom, and met with an obedient ear. Psalm 141, verse 5. Verses 8 and 9. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be yet wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. There is scarcely a man so wise and holy as not to need instruction and reproof. The difference between wise men and fools lies not in this, that the former are above reproofs, but that they know their need of them and are disposed to receive them with meekness, and to improve by them, and to love and thank their reprovers. Psalm 141, verse 5. The wise and the just man are the same in the view of this wisest of men. For this is a fundamental maxim in his writings. Verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. Solomon knew how to appreciate that wisdom which directs men in the prudent management of their own concerns, and in the wise administration of public affairs. But he rightly judged that religion is the true wisdom, and that, compared with it, all other kinds are vanity and folly. He examined with the eye of the prince of philosophers the objects of nature, but the knowledge of the most holy God, one in essence, but subsisting in three persons, was in his estimation true understanding. This kind of knowledge excels the other as much as the light of the sun the glimmer of a glowworm. He that knows God in truth is possessed of a never-ending life. John 17, verse 3. Philippians 3, verse 8. Verse 11. For by me thy days shall be multiplied, and the years of thy life shall be increased. It is not for God's benefit, but for ours that he invites us to receive wisdom. Proverbs 3, verse 2. Job 35, verse 6. If thou be wise, thou shalt be wise for thyself, but if thou scornest, thou alone shalt bear it. God can receive no additions of blessedness by our wisdom, though he delights in it. He cannot lose his glory by our contempt of his gospel and laws. Ezekiel 33:11. Romans 9, verse 22. The ministers of wisdom will rejoice in our compliance with their calls. But the profit or the loss of our behavior under a dispensation of the gospel must be felt by ourselves. Isaiah 49, verse 4. Life and death are set before us. May God grant us a disposition to choose life. Another offer is made us of entertainment, but alas, of how different a kind. It is made by the harlot, against whom we need to be often warned. Verse 13, a foolish woman is clamorous. She is simple and knows nothing. She is foolish, ignorant, and stupid to the last degree, for she buys a moment of empty delight at the expense of everlasting burnings. She is impudent and clamorous. The damned in hell are afraid that their companions should come to their place of torment. But this shameless creature earnestly calls others to share with her in those pleasures which are followed by everlasting sorrows. Verses 14 and 15. For she sits at the door of her house, on a seat, in the high places of the city, to call passengers who go right on their ways. They are evil times when tempters to sin are permitted to hunt so avowedly for prey. Let well-meaning persons in such a time watch and pray against temptation. These are the persons whom the foolish woman solicits, and too often with success. Verses 16 and 17. Whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. And as for him that wants understanding, she saith to him, stolen waters are sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. They are surely stupid who believe that there is any pleasure in those things that are forbidden by God, and afraid to appear in open day. Yet such is the corruption of the hearts of men, that they relish doctrine so contrary to reason as well as to Scripture. We are naturally prone to things forbidden, until our souls are renewed by the grace of God, can taste an unaccountable sweetness in that which is poison to the soul. But when we are restored to a sound mind, those delights only will be relished which consist with a pure conscience and the dignity of a rational and immortal soul. It is through blindness and inconsideration that any man is entangled in the snares of the foolish woman. Verse 18. But he knows not that the dead are there, and that her guests are in the depths of hell. We are naturally starving creatures, and cannot find happiness within ourselves. As every man must have food to satisfy the natural cravings of hunger, so every soul must have some gratification to its desires of happiness. Wisdom and folly do each spread a feast for men. The question is, whose guests shall we be? And did we possess any wisdom or any true and well-directed self-love, it might be easily decided. The entertainments of wisdom are soul-quickening provision. They that hear her call shall eat that which is good, and their soul shall live forever. The guests of wisdom are in the heights of heaven. They feast on the hidden manna, and on the fruits of the tree of life. The provisions of the foolish woman are a deadly, though perhaps a slow poison. Her guests have their portion with the wicked giants, who brought on the world a universal deluge, and with the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah, who were set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. Let us consider where Joseph now is, and what blessings are come upon the crown of the head of him who so bravely resisted temptations, the most alluring and the most threatening. Let us, on the other hand, remember Sodom and Gomorrah, and choose our portion with the one or the other. Be astonished, O heavens, that men should be so cruel to their own souls as to deliberate a moment in so clear a case. Today, let us hear the voice of wisdom.